Welcome, Rasil.
Thank you, Shamla. It's lovely to be here.
Can you quickly tell our viewers what your book is all about?
Sure. My book, Unfair, which she just held, and I'll just show you another copy, is about two girls. They're two very close friends, Leena and Meher. And basically, Leena is this dreamy sort of personality. She's just this lovely, warm, gentle soul. And she aspires to be an actress. She sees herself as an artiste. So she decides to try out for the school play. And when she goes to try out for the lead role, and she goes to the teacher to ask about, suggestions or pointers, the teacher is confused by her interest in the role of Juliet, which the play is Romeo and Juliet. And it's because Leena is not a fair maiden. She's not a light-skinned child. And so it defies the idea of beauty that the teacher, who's not really representing teachers, let me just say, she's just representing our society. So her idea of beauty is someone who's fair-skinned, and Leena does not fit that mold. And so it's really about how unfair that is.
Right, that's interesting. So the word unfair can be interpreted in so many ways. When you keep the book in perspective, what is your interpretation of unfair?
To me, unfair is just, it's about justice. It's about, everyone having a sense of purpose and of a sense of who they are within. And that should not be denied by anyone just because of a particular bias. And frankly, most biases are based on some sort of vanity. But this kind of vanity impacts our children, impacts their development as they become adults, because you still see it in our cohorts, for example, those same, the sort of same misgivings about oneself, not being worthy. And I think we need to. This is not a self-help book. This is not intended to change the world. It is simply intended to open your eyes, just a little wider.
So, at what point did you realize that you had to tell the story of Unfair?
So the idea of Unfair came to me 10 years ago. And 5 years ago is when it sort of became more compelling to me, because it's when I realized, as I was mentioning earlier, that people in my cohort were still thinking the same way that generations before them had. And they either didn't realize it, or if they did realize it, they had misgivings about it, but somehow it didn't stem those thoughts. And then you saw them being, you saw that being applied to their children. So I was mentioning the other day to someone, why do we as Indians, whether we are light-skinned Indians or darker-skinned Indians, why do we need to wear SPF 100? It is not intended for our skin tone. It is intended for those, wonderful Scandinavians who just think about the sun and burn. So I think, those are the kind of things that in modern day play out, because now we have access to SPF 100, so we apply it on our children from head to toe. And I think we need to, we just need to ask ourselves those questions. Why?
So most writers, they choose the past tense to tell the story. Your book is written in the present tense. So what value addition came by writing this story in the present tense?
So this was actually a challenge I set for myself, because I did, of course, write the first book in past tense. And then I started writing this book the same way. And then I just kept thinking, no, it's forcing me to sort of look back. And I don't want, even though I'm not a 12-year-old, I don't want my character to be looking back. I want my character to be engaging with the present and reacting to things as they come. And it also helped my thought process as I was writing. So I have a very specific way I write. I do a detailed outline, scene by scene, and then I start writing out the whole story. So I have a sense of the direction in which it's going. But even so, I wanted, as the scenes played themselves out, when they were in the present tense, it just made it, it allowed me to sort of experiment a little bit more. But I'll tell you, I think 75% of the way through, I decided that maybe I should rewrite it in past tense. So that would have, of course,
So you
taken a lot.
literally rewrote the entire story once you discovered it'll be smoother.
Yeah, I started actually, you know what, it just reminded me because it was a year and a half ago, but it feels like a lifetime ago. So much has happened since then. But when I first started writing the book, I was writing in past tense. And then I decided to make it present tense. Well, the chapters did not flow at all. I was up to chapter 6 at that point. And those 6 chapters became, I think, more than 12. And so much got cut out.
So the choice of Romeo and Juliet,
Hmm.
you know, the Shakespeare's play, which appears in the book, how did that fit in?
So Shakespeare is, you know, we were all force-fed a diet of Shakespeare in high school, I think,
Yes,
and even
yes.
into college.
Yes.
And so it, you know, and he's not that simple to understand, although he is simple to understand. There's so much simplicity, and then there's so much complexity and so many layers built in. So I think in that sense, using him as a device was really helpful to me because I could say certain things through his words that I just would not be able to capture in a sense on my own. And so that helped. And because Lena is that dreamy character who dreams of being this artist, it just made sense that she would romanticize, you know, theater as Shakespeare, which I think most people do associate classical theater with that. So that just was sort of easy for me in that sense. And I think, you know, Shakespeare has just universal themes that flow through all of his work, his sonnets. It's love, it's unrequited love, it's tragedy, it's jealousy, it's hate. There's so much emotion there. There's so much that you can go and find. And so I tapped into that and said, let me see how this works for the story.
So Shakespeare also makes an appearance in your first book. Can you show the book to your viewers?
Sure.
Rosie Singh. Yeah, it's What You Gonna Do, Rosie Singh.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's published by Penguin and Disney.
That's right.
So what's the Shakespeare connection in this?
So the Shakespeare connection in this is that Rosie is inspecting her older sister's, you know, bookshelf of books because she's decided to homeschool herself. And so she decides, okay, well, if I'm going to homeschool myself, then I need to see what's coming my way. And I'm sure I can tackle anything, you know, because she thinks nothing is impossible for her. So when she finds Shakespeare, she thinks it's French because the sister is also taking French. And it's a language that she just doesn't understand. You know, ye and a case to put it into, but speak you this with a sad brow. I mean, for someone who's in grade 3, that's a tough call.
Yeah. You spent your childhood in different parts of India and America.
Yes.
Do you find what kind of similarities and differences do you find in skin prejudices in both these countries?
Well, the thing is that in the US, it's racial. Okay. And in India, in my mind, because I'm not a sociologist by any stretch, it's a bit more cultural and social. So whereas in a sense, if you look at it, you know, even within the African American community in the US for the last 100 years, within families, there has been this bias towards lighter skinned African American children versus darker skinned. So if you take that, if you build off of that and you look at it within India, that's sort of what we are also doing, right? We prefer our lighter skinned grandchildren to our darker skinned grandchildren, or even children, in fact. And but I don't think if you're thinking about white versus black, I don't think that's what we have necessarily in India. I think there's no white privilege in India, but there definitely is fair privilege in India.
So you've been an educator for many years, right?
Yes, I was in education for some time, not a very long time, but some time.
Yeah. So do you find a difference in the way children deal with skin prejudices today when compared to the time you were in school?
So I think that I had a highly unusual experience in the US because when I moved to the US at the age of 8, I went to a school that was so multicultural, it looked like the United Nations. I mean, I had friends from Indonesia, from Cambodia, from Taiwan, from Vietnam. One was half Chinese, half white American. one was African American. So it was a very unusual school. My cousins did not go to schools that looked like mine. So I think, so my experience in terms of prejudice was really limited. It wasn't in my world. It wasn't part of the language that I spoke. So it's hard for me to compare that because I think my experience was unusual.
Discuss. Okay. Did you start? No, this book got released during the pandemic, so you didn't have time to promote the book among schools. Did you interact with students?
I have interacted with two schools. There's Eklavya schools in Bangalore and also with the Neve Academy, actually the Neve Lit Fest.
So what has the experience been? How have children responded to the book? And
yeah, it's been interesting actually because with one school, the children were much younger. They were at the bottom end of the age range, so they were in grade 3. And I think their ability to sort of digest some of the ideas and thoughts in the book it was a bit more challenging for them, I would say. And but they were interested and they were listening. You know, even if you put the idea out there as like a test balloon, you know, it settles somewhere at some point, and you may not think about it today because as an 8-year-old self you may not, but maybe when you're 11 and 12, when you hear those ideas again, you'll make a connection. And I think that's what I did too when I was younger. You know, there were things that were floating around me. I didn't exactly connect with them, and then suddenly a little later in life when I was a bit more mature, I did. So with the older students, they had a ton of questions, you know, similar to yours. What was the inspiration? Comparing colorism in India versus colorism in the US, because that is where the hot topic is today. And, you know, talking about just what does it mean? How does this prejudice play out? Where have you seen it? So their questions were much more targeted.
Right. Do you see a difference in the way boys and girls handle skin bias?
I used to think, you know, having the female perspective, that it's really more for girls than it is for boys. And I think for the most part in India, that's exactly how it used to be, I would say, right? More girls were interested in being fair and lovely versus boys. They could go out, they could play in the sun, they could, you know, be different shades of gray even, and no one cared. But I have seen over the last decade or so that boys are paying much more attention to how they look, and to how people perceive them based on their looks. So I remember recently, a while back, someone was moving, and they had a dark-skinned child, and they said, "Oh, you might have a tough time. You know, your boy will be so much darker than the others in his school." So I think those kind of things are there. And if you look at, you know, if there was Fair and Lovely just for women, now there's a blue version for men. And when John Abraham, I'm sorry, I really like John Abraham, but when John Abraham washes his face with some Nivea related product, he's washing off dirt, you know, to become fair. So they're making it a bit more masculine, but at the end of the day, your darker color is still dirty, and it's not. So
the media plays an important role in the way, you know, the whole issue is played out.
Yes.
The acknowledgement section of your book refers to the Smithsonian Human Origin Initiative, and I believe you did a bit of research. So, what was your biggest takeaway from that initiative?
Yeah,
I think it's more of something to do with science, the science behind the skin.
Yes, exactly. Why is it that some of us are darker skinned and while others are, you know, are lighter skinned? And you know, we know that there's, I mean, again, not being someone who's a scientist, but you know, I know that there's inheritance involved in terms of eye color and, you know, so many different aspects of ourselves. But we're talking about an entire large groups, swaths of people across the world who share characteristics, physical characteristics, and one of them is skin color. So why? So when I was doing this, I thought, you know, most kids, as a child and as an adult, I don't want you just to tell me what it is and that's it. No, some of us are light skinned, some of us are dark skinned. No, I want to know why. Because if I must understand the reason for that. So even if I'm a lighter skinned person, why am I lighter skinned? If I'm a darker skinned person, why am I darker skinned? And once you understand that it's just science, then there's no reason for prejudice.
Right. So, family is an important enabler in Leena and Meher's life. There's a certain kind of connection Meher has with her mom, right? And Leena's connection with her mother is entirely different. And somehow I feel that the way and what a mother tells her child, that plays an important factor in building self-esteem and self-confidence. So what can you tell us about Leena's mother and her openness towards Leena's experiments towards beauty? Because there are a whole lot of things that she tries and finally the acceptance happens.
Yeah. I think, we also have to understand as parents of young children, and having been, really thinking about how we were when we were young, is no matter how fabulous your relationship is with your child, there are things they keep to themselves. Yes. Anything that has to do with their insecurities, they keep to themselves, because if you give it voice, if you give it air, then it might become a whole thing of itself, right? You're not ready for it just yet. So Leena has a great relationship with her mother. Her mother is clearly aware of the fact that one of her children, and I don't mention whether her brother is lighter skin or darker skin, because it's irrelevant, or what her mother looks like. But she's aware that people have looked at her child and wondered about her skin tone, and she's. How do you fight that? So you can either argue with people, which most people are unwilling to do and may not get you anywhere, or you just find a way to support your child. And I remember, because I remember this of my mother. So growing up in my family, I was darker skinned than the rest of my cousins, because I was such a tomboy. I was always out in the sun, and in general, I am darker skinned. So my mother would always say to me, if someone said something, she'd whisper later on, she'd say, "You're the prettiest, they're just jealous." So, these are the kind of things that you remember. And also, actually, that helped me realize that pretty and fair go together. I may never have made that connection so clearly, if it hadn't been said that way. And it wasn't said in any, there was no ill intent, but it just makes you realize these things. So I think, their relationship is wonderful, but Leena's keeping things to herself, and she's trying things out. And when she's ready to share it, when things, blow up, essentially, she does. And she finds a very supportive parent, but she has to do it herself. You see, she has to find her inner strength. You cannot use someone else as a crutch. There's no growth then.
So tell us something about Leena and Meher's friendship.
Yeah, they're a little bit of... they're very sweet.
Sweet, very sweet.
Yeah, they're sweet because they're a little opposite, and it's easy for me when I was making when I was doing a character study and I came up with these two characters, I made them sort of very opposite, So Meher is very logical. She's very she has a mathematical bent of mind. She's tall, she's scrawny, she's awkward. And Leena is sort of the opposite. She's a little bit more sophisticated. Like I said, she's sort of this dreamy artiste, and she's very bright. She's very intelligent, but she's real soft inside. And so, and she's wordy, right? She loves words, and she loves to talk, and she loves to share. And so that exuberance that's there, it's something that, Meher sort of lives through Leena in that sense. She's too shy to try things herself, but she knows Leena's there, and they're and together they sort of can do a lot. So I wanted to present them as slight extremes in the sense of opposites attract, but without making it, I hope, too obvious.
Yeah, I love what you created on page number 86. If you can read that, the equation where Meher uses to realize that she is not the problem,
Yes. Yeah, thank you. Oh, what a lovely thing to pick out.
Do you want to say a bit about the scene you're about to read, this particular scene as such?
Yes. So in this scene, Lena and Meher have a conversation. So Lena has suddenly become very withdrawn, and Meher can't figure out what happened. So because, and Lena's, the very chatty one, the one who carries Meher and their friendship essentially. And now Meher doesn't know what to do without her. She's sort of her North Pole in that sense, our North Star. So they have a conversation on the phone, and Lena just says, of course she wouldn't understand. And so Meher again is floundering, trying to figure out what happened. So she does. She does the math, because that's the only way she can break down the world. I've done the math. 1, everything was fine when we got to school. 2, it was fine when Lena skipped off to see Miss Deepa. 3, everything was not fine when Lena returned to the classroom after meeting Miss Deepa. 4, so then if the equation is Lena plus X equals Lena acting weird, and if X does not equal me, or so she says, then X equals Miss Deepa. Therefore, Lena plus Miss Deepa equals Lena acting weird.
And just for the information of our viewers, Miss Deepa is the teacher in charge of the play.
The drama program, yes. Yes.
Would you like to read something else?
Yes. We touched upon this, you and I, when we were talking about Lena and her relationship with her mother. Yes. So this is a part from that. I want to read the little part from Macbeth, Act 1, Scene 1, which is the start of this chapter, showing, from Lena's perspective. Fair is foul, and foul is fair, hover through the fog and filthy air. It's all so obvious now, why Mom's cousin always remarks that her children are as white as milk, and then throws me a funny look. Why once the Ayurvedic doctor advised Mom to give me milk with saffron for a better complexion, even though what I came for was to have a rash treated. Why, after moments like that, Mom envelops me in a tight embrace, smothers me with kisses, and tells me I am beautiful and that she loves every bit of me.
Oh, that's so sweet, so reassuring.
Thank you.
So, you said you wrote this book with detailed chapter analysis and character study, all that. So did you train to be a writer? Were you attending courses before you wrote this book? So was it, chapter outlines don't come naturally. I mean, the first, especially, they come more of instinct. You have a story in your head, then people just start writing down. And then later on during the revision process, when somebody tells, they kind of break it into chapters. The way it should appear and all that.
So I think that's, I did teaching for a while. I did writing, and writing before that I was teaching. And before teaching, I was in the tech industry. I used to do implementation of software programs and also do a lot of technical writing. So in that sense, doing things in an orderly fashion was second nature by then. You have to be prepared, right? I mean, even if you walk into a classroom, you can't walk into a classroom, you shouldn't, if you don't have a lesson plan there. So you things may not go exactly as you have laid them out, but they should generally follow a particular template. Right. So I think that's where I come from. So even I had taken a writing course just before Rosie Singh. So Rosie Singh the idea was in my head for many, many years. And then through that writing course, I wrote the first chapter, and then, it took, and after that, the book was
Where did you take the course?
The Gotham Writers Workshop.
Right. Is it New York?
It's exactly right. So this was 2009. Okay. And it was a birthday gift from my sister-in-law, my husband's sister, because she figured unless she forced me to sit down and write, I would just keep talking about wanting to be a writer one day and never, but it would just be this idea floating in the air all the time. Really? I think they were tired of hearing me talk about it. So that's sort of
that she gave you this gift, because we have 2 books. Okay, and this book really rocks.
Thank you. That's so kind of you.
Is there something else you'd like to share with the viewers? Is the 3rd book going to have Shakespeare? Is there a book cooking right now? No.
There is a book cooking. There are 2-3 different ideas, and it's hard to write. Actually, it's not hard to write. It's hard to be disciplined, so that you sit every day and you write. So what I figured I'd do is I would just write down all these ideas I have, and then take one and just start working on it. Because as you say, you know, the first time you get a book published, for me, it only applies to me. It does not apply to anybody else in the world. It felt like a fluke. And so the second one feels like, okay, maybe I have something here. So now it's not until I get a third one out that I think, you know, I would feel comfortable calling myself an author.
You are an author. Right. Thank you so much for joining me here today.
Thanks for having me.
Yeah. So show the book. Okay. So do get this wonderful book by Rasil Ahuja, Unfair. Yeah. Okay.
Thank you.
Any words, parting words?
Oh, there's a song in here, you know.
Oh, have you composed it? Is it set to tune?
Well, it's a rap, and you don't want to hear me sing, so I will just say, because I think, you know, everyone can find their own music, right? Okay. So I would just maybe I'll just leave them with the third verse.
Okay. Okay.
And it goes like this: black, white, brown, it's only skin we bear. I need not be light to be debonair. My color is pride, it's what I choose to wear. My heart swells, I tell, so kiss my derriere.
Wow.
Just be fair.